Listen only mode.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Questions and Answers with David Book, and we already had a pre-session question answered there on Scringo. Um, I have unmuted everybody's microphone. Please mute your mic on your end, and then when you're called upon, we'll just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Um, at this point, if you have any questions, you can send them to me through the question window. I'll forward them on to David. And at this time, let's go ahead and turn it over to David.
Hi, gang. It's been, I think it's been a week and a half or so since I've been on one of these with you, and thanks for having me back, and thanks for joining us. If you've not done one of these before, the idea is we're just going to hang out for an hour or so and talk about hopefully productive things, but it doesn't have to be productive. Sometimes the questions are a little bit random, but that's fine. We don't need any rules or anything like that. We're going to field questions from the audience in as much detail as we can. When it comes to the technical things, some of them tend to go off on little tangents, and we have to be mindful of the hour, the hour that we have, and the the other questions. And so, if we don't get a bunch of questions, then we can kind of tailor how long we spend on each one, with that in mind. And so, I'm going to start off by mentioning the question that Ian used, that just a second ago about Scringo, and he was asking about some people in the forum who are casually talking about maybe hiring each other to help them with Scringo, or maybe one user is saying, "Hey, I don't understand this Scringo stuff. Can you help me integrate it?" And so I'll touch bases a little bit on what Scringo is and why that was something that Ian was bringing up. I'm going to go to Scringo.com right now, and what Scringo is a process, an approach, a system. It's a method for developers like us to add features into our app that help it get discovered, help socialize it, just kind of bring it to the next level in terms of what it does. And so there's lots of different ways to explain kind of how cool it is, but I'll just leave it at this. I'm a huge Scringo fan. I love what it'll do for the audience participation in your app. And rather than us trying to create a lot of this stuff on our own, we've partnered with Scringo. And so in the near future, we're going to be announcing that partnership and allowing your Buzztouch control panel to include the Scringo package in your Buzztouch app. So that's a significant thing. If you're a Buzztouch member, that means that you're going to have some additional benefits that free Scringo users don't get. And we'll talk about that in the announcement. But that also means that as it relates to Ian's question, if I was in the forum right now and I was looking for some help with Scringo, I guess if I wanted it right now, I guess I could pay someone to help me if it was too complicated or too confusing. But I think I'd probably be better off giving it a week or so. Where their end is basically done with the integration technical work. As usual, they're waiting on our end. I say as usual because lots of people are waiting on us to do lots of technical things. But I want to say that Scringo is going to be in your download in as little as a week. And so I'll stop that and I'll start asking Warren if he sees any questions, and we'll go from there.
Excuse me, nothing so far, David. I don't have any questions loaded up
You
here.
want to talk about BuzzCon?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And as it turns out, many of our attendees here are going to participate. I see Jim King there. I believe he's coming down. Sean McMean is going to be there. Tim Wolf will be there. And of course, Ian and Susan and you and I, David.
Awesome.
And so if you have not made arrangements to go, we certainly welcome you to show up in St. Louis and be a part of the group on April 19th, 20th, and 21st. That's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in St. Louis. All of the locations and phone numbers you need are all at the top of the forum, and that'll get you hooked up to get there. Friday really is going to be more of a kind of a leadership get together and such, but once that's done late Friday evening, I'm sure we'll go back to the hotel, and for the people that have already arrived, we'll get together in the lobby or there's a bar there and a restaurant, and get to know each other better. And then Saturday, we've got quite a few activities. It'll kick off with Chris Robbins hosting a Buzzcast roundtable, and all of us that are part of the leadership team will be part of that broadcast, followed by at least three sessions by David. We got Niraj Shah is going to be making a presentation. I think Susan's got kind of a multi-voting thing to help with the plugin market. Saturday evening should be fun and social. I've got some ideas of some things that'll kind of help build some networking and teamwork and that kind of thing, and it should be a fun activity. And then on Sunday, I imagine it'll be just a gathering of everybody spending time together, getting to know each other more, and it'll be a very productive weekend, and it should be a lot of fun and some great networking opportunities.
That's awesome. Hey, and I want to throw out something that it sounds kind of silly, but I think everybody deserves this on our team and also in the audience and the memberships, that we should have thrown out before. There's a little bit of speculation about kind of the looseness to the agenda on Saturday, and I want to put a couple of titles on two of the discussions I'm going to be leading. I'm assuming that these are going to be just under an hour each because we've got a lot of things lined up, so I'm going to go with that unless you tell me differently. But I think we need to just kind of shape up what Saturday is going to be, because that's kind of the meat and potatoes of the day. But one of them I'm going to do is going to be titled Change is Good, and we're going to have a discussion about just how quickly this ecosystem being mobile changes, and how most developers get frustrated with those changes, naturally so, for good reason. But I want to put a new twist on that and have a conversation about why me as a developer, and I have, as a developer, have always embraced fast-moving things, and that'll be a good conversation, a lot to be learned there. And then the other one I'm going to title Making Money, Making Apps, and that's a pretty broad statement. We could talk about 50 different directions and 50 different hour-long seminars about all the different nuances of all the different strategies and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to summarize kind of my perspective for that hour or so as it relates to making some money. And so I'm going to give a third one that I have not come up with a title yet for. I don't care what order these are given, but I guess we'll let Warren decide that when the agenda gets printed. But more than anything, I want to come up with that third title. I know Niraj has his title, and Susan's got her title, so that the agenda's set, so folks know what they're getting into. But yeah, that's a great one. I'm excited about going to St. Louis. That's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of work, but it'll be fun.
Well, I'm excited to have everybody coming here, kind of in my backyard in St. Louis. It's
and Tony too, right?
Yeah, Tony's right there in St. Louis. I'm about an hour and a half away, but still, I picked the location simply because I thought it was central in the United States and easy in, easy out as far as travel goes, and the and the expense of the event should be low compared to Monterey or New York City, something like that. So hopefully it's an event that even if people haven't made arrangements now, that they can put something together and get here for, because I think they'll have a great time. I did see that Mad Rod, our buddy over in Portugal, he sent me an email yesterday saying he was coming. So it'll be great to have him here, and everybody
That's
else
awesome.
that can make the trip as well. I'm really excited about it. I know about a week.
I had a conversation this morning. I had a Skype for an hour and a half this morning to Berlin in Germany, and amazing guy who travels a ton for a business, and he's just sick that he can't make it to St. Louis. He's going to be he's going to be in Cambodia and Vietnam for a month during that event, so he just couldn't get there or whatever. But yeah, we're gonna have some interesting personalities from a lot of different places. That'll be really cool. I'm going to change the subject a little bit, and I'm going to ask a question for Tim, who's in our meeting today, because I got an email from Tim the other day about an interesting problem that I consider important, and I'm trying to find some time to work through this. I'll ask the question, then I'll try to answer the question. Tim has built an app with, and he's certainly welcome to weigh in and correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm not looking at my email. He's built an app with a ton of different PDF screens in it, and lots and lots of content, all PDFs. And what he's experiencing is if the user in the iPad opens and closes and opens and closes and opens and closes PDFs one after the other, when he gets to about 30 or so iterations of that, which seems extreme, but who knows, maybe it's important enough content to look at 30 different things, I don't know. When he gets to about 30 iterations of opening and closing the PDFs, the app crashes. And not only does the app crash, but it actually crashes the OS and the whole device crashes, which is pretty wild. And so it needs to be rebooted and restarted, and I'm sure it's frustrating for the person driving the iPad. And so he and I have our suspicions about what might be going on, and they're memory related. We think maybe the memory is not being released properly on the plugin that he's using, which I believe is might be the PDF plugin, but it might also be the custom URL plugin. I can't remember if they're coming from the internet or they're in the project. I think they're in the project. So the PDF plugin.
Yes.
At any rate,
PDF plugin, simple menu plugin.
Yeah, awesome. And so it's not going to be related to the menu, I don't think, but it could be. I think it's going to be related to the plugin itself when it loads the PDF and allocates a bunch of memory to hold that document, which can get a little bit heavy sometimes. PDFs are good looking, image graphic rich sometimes. They take some memory up. But when you leave that should be freed and released, we call it in iOS. But so the question is how come this thing is crashing after a bunch of iterations? And the answer is, I don't know yet, but I imagine that we're not successfully getting rid of all of the memory that we're allocating for that screen. And so the conversation around that, without getting too technical, without getting into his app, I should say, I'm going to show you an example of the concept that I believe is going to lead us towards the fix. I'm going to open up Xcode. I'm sharing my screen right now, so you should be able to see this. I'll open up a project in Xcode. Oh, you know what? I downloaded the new Xcode last night on this machine, and I have not installed it, so I won't use Xcode. And instead, I'll just open this up in Notepad. So never mind my screen here. I wonder how I get rid of this. Cancel's not working. Craziness. Okay, so let me open up here a file. We'll open up, how about the carousel plugin? This is a cool carousel plugin. We'll open up the .m file and we'll just look at it in a text editor. By the way, did everybody get the 4.6.1 Xcode installed? You see I haven't used this machine with it yet, but I got it installed. So the concept here is I'm going to open up the .m and I'm going to open up the .h, and I'm quickly taking this technical until we get some more questions if we get any, just to explore these ideas and maybe learn a little something. This is a memory management concept, which could merit an entire day of learning, but here's the idea. In our .h file of an Objective-C class, we're going to describe to the compiler things that we call properties or fields. Some people call them variables. Technically, in Java, you would call this a field. In Objective-C, you would call it a property. But what we're saying to the compiler here in our .h file, which is called an interface. The interface is going to describe to our compiler and the programmer, if you're a programmer, as a human, you can read this, what this class is kind of going to do. So it explains what all of the properties are, or the variables, and so the type of variable it is, and then the name that we give it. This is just an arbitrary name, so we have an array or a list of things, an NS mutable array. That's called descriptions. We have an NS mutable array called AK image file names. So we describe those properties to the compiler, and then we do a little bit of more describing with more details. I won't get into the syntax of an interface file in Objective-C, but there's lots of different ways to do this. So this is basically working hand in hand with this property up here, and this property declaration down here allows us to give it what we call arguments or rules. But anyway, so we describe those, and then we list in the interface file all of the methods that we're going to do. So we have a method called load data, one called download data, one called should wrap, did scroll, all these kinds of things. So that tells the compiler what to expect in the .m file, which is where we actually implement these ideas that we described in the .h. So in the .m, which is called an implementation, we're going to do all kinds of crazy stuff in here, including allocate memory for objects. So if you were to search this page for the word allocate, A-L-L-O-C, and you were to find that, everywhere you found that is where you're telling iOS as a developer to allocate some memory for this thing or this property or this object. So this object, the descriptions, needs a place to live in memory. And so that's what the allocate, alloc is short for allocate statement does. And so we're saying that this property, this object, self.descriptions, self being this class, is an NS mutable array, just like we told it was going to be over here in the interface. And we're going to allocate memory for it. So that means that as developers, we're responsible for having to do what we call release that memory. And if we don't release that memory somewhere in our code, now when is a whole other discussion, we'll get to that in a sec, but if we don't release that memory somewhere in our code, then we've created what programmers call a memory leak. And if you get too many memory leaks, well then your software will crash the app, right? Or crash the operating system. So you can see here that we're releasing the descriptions and additionally setting it to nil to make sure that it's nothing anymore when this screen deallocates itself. So when the screen goes away, we release the memory. So that's technically what I think is going on with the PDF plugin in Tim's app, is I think there's some objects being created, some memory being allocated that are not being properly released. Now, to take this a step further, some of you might be seeing or reading about online this concept of ARC. And I want to take this opportunity to talk about this. What is ARC? What the heck is ARC? ARC stands for Automatic Reference Counting. So what does that mean? What is a reference? So a reference is just a technical way to describe this location in memory that we allocated. So technically, right down to the nuts and bolts of the operating system, self.descriptions, this object, is really just a pointer or a reference to a place in memory. So this reference is the technical word for what's happening. We're creating a reference to this memory. So that's the reference that we have to get rid of. We need to create references and then get rid of references as developers. Well, that's problematic, as demonstrated by the symptom that Tim's talking about, right? Somewhere in there, we think it's not managing memory properly. So problematic because in many operating systems, such as Java, it's not our responsibility as a developer to worry about managing memory and allocating and deallocating and releasing and all that kind of stuff. The operating system does it for us, and that is called garbage collection. So garbage collection is slang for the operating system is taking care of the memory allocations and deallocations for us. So you'll hear people talk about, you know, what garbage collection method does it use? That would mean, like, does the language you're programming in, C#, C++, Objective-C, Java, whatever, does it manage the memory for you or does it not? And it's gotten to the point where all the languages do except Objective-C. So it's kind of silly now that we have to worry about this in Objective-C. So ARC is Apple's innovation that allows us to not worry about deallocating things anymore. So automatic reference counting is a setting that you can turn on or turn off in your project. So none of the Buzztouch code uses automatic reference counting yet because it wasn't available when all this code was written and when these plugins were written. So everyone who's doing iOS development today is recommending, hey, move towards ARC. It's so much better. Use the new compilers. Use the new Xcode so you don't have to worry about memory. And I completely agree. That's exciting and fun, and we will definitely be moving towards using automatic reference counting, so none of us have to worry about it in the future. But today you can't use it. and you can't, not with a Buzztouch project without doing a bunch of work. And so it's actually not that hard if you just wanted to search through the files in your project. Really, all you'll have to do if you want to turn on automatic reference counting is get rid of all your release statements, because that's what the compiler yells at. It's like, hey, you want to release this, or do you want me to release this? And so that's about 20 minutes about memory management, and I think a fun discussion. I get fascinated with these kinds of things. I'm looking for my code my notes that I wrote so I can take it out of this. And if you guys want to maybe ask some questions about that, I'm happy to discuss that. I haven't seen any questions in there. I'm glad we got to kind of throw that one out there for Tim. And Tim, I do hope to get to that as soon as I can. I've got a bunch of stuff going on, as you know, and hopefully your customer, your client, or whoever you've made this for kind of understands. I realized they were running out of a little patience or something on these crashes, and I totally get that. But we'll do the best we can to figure them out. So, Warren, I don't see anything in the list.
I don't. Well, wait a minute here. So Tim just responded, okay, so, and that's kind of where he left it. I don't know if he's got a comment or a question.
You gotta love Tim. Tim, by the way, is going to go see Counting Crows at in a theater in Chicago that Ian has played in. How cool is that? And how ironic that we can have a dozen of us online and have that weird connection.
I think you got your stories kind of mixed up. Actually, it's Tim Walney.
Is it the other way around?
Tim Walney, who's A-Train, and
right.
he's going to the pageant, which is in St. Louis.
Oh, I thought it was in Chicago.
No. It's
okay.
It's in St. Louis. It's actually probably about 5 miles from our venue.
Is it some famous place or something?
It's pretty legendary, yes.
And Ian is cool. Played there. That's
so
cool.
When Ian said that, I was like stunned. You at the pageant. How long ago was that, Ian?
That was probably back in 2003, before I completely became a nerd on Buzztouch. But
well, I did a little searching. I saw your videos, and it didn't look like it was that far back when you did those.
Well, maybe 2005. Maybe we passed through there the last time. But
okay.
But yeah, well, I'm sure the Flies have played there too. So
it's funny. We have this other odd connection too. It's so wild.
Yeah, if you look at all the musicians that are part of the leadership team, we could form a rock band, I think, with Chris, and Susan plays the bass and Ian on piano, and who knows where we could go with it.
Yeah, another side story, and I'll say this because Ian's thinking it and hasn't spoken up, but we talk about all these crazy twists that this is taking us, this internet thing of ours. When I went to Southern California to meet Ian for the first time in person and learn a little bit about him and ask him for help, in essence, we were swapping stories and getting to know each other a little bit more personally as friends would. And I learned about this music past of his, which I knew a little bit about before. As it turns out, not only has he played in the theater that Tim is going to, but Ian played along with my brother, my older brother, on the road 10 years ago in a whole different, rock tour bus kind of life. And he and I were just blown away by this idea that 10 years ago he was, making music with my brother. And 10 years later, he's making software with it. Just crazy. It just doesn't make any sense. But it's
and your brother's crazy. It's awesome.
Yeah. Hey, so let's get off of the personal stuff because we're gonna. I mean, not that I could talk about that stuff forever, but I see a question from Smug, which is great, and Jim's got a plug-in question too. So we'll get to both of these. So Smug, let me try to answer that for you. His question is, does super deallocate release everything? And so that's a great question. And so I'm going to copy this right here, and I'm actually just going to cut this out, and I'm going to move it up here, and we'll talk about this. So he's got a really good question, and you'd think that this would be easy, but it can get kind of technical. When iOS calls the deallocate method in this class, in this example we're using the Buzz carousel, but it could be any Objective-C class. When iOS deallocates the memory for this class, we're saying, hey, when this method fires, we want you to also fire this deallocate method in the super. What the heck is super? So we have to get our head around what super is before we can understand what this means. So what super means, let's see if I can put this on paper and try to describe this. Super means the parent class of this class. So this class is a child or a subclass of a Buzztouch view controller. So by saying super deallocate, you're saying, hey, parent class, I want you to run your deallocate method also. And if you were to look at that class, the BT view controller class, which I don't have open, it will also have a super method. And in it, I'll bet that it says super, a deallocate method, and I'll bet it says super deallocate, which means it should call its parent class's deallocate method, which is the standard UI view controller. So these methods kind of trickle down. So if you have a class called myClass1, and it is extending the UI view controller, and then you've got another class, let's do it this way. You have a class called Buzztouch view controller, and it's extending the UI view controller, meaning all of the UI view controller's properties and methods are available to it. And then you make another class called myCoolPlugin, and it extends the BT view controller. See how this works? This class extends this class, and then this class extends this class. So all of the methods here are available here, and all of the methods here are available here. So if you called myCoolPlugin release, which is going to be something like you see in the source code, in the .m file, you're going to see something like self.release, because you're referring to self. But we don't call this, deallocate. But we don't call the deallocate method. iOS does that for us. But when it happens, if you see super deallocate, like we see here, you're saying iOS is triggering the deallocate method. Then you, as a developer, saying, yeah, in the parent class, run its deallocate method, and then it could run its deallocate method in the parent class. So it's kind of like a trickle down or a trickle up or a bubble up, we call that, or bubble down. It's really, really hard to get your head around when these methods are deallocating memory. And that's why we use our handy dandy debugger, so that we can see in the log, deallocate. You could write yourself a message here, deallocate it triggered here. You can see in the output console when iOS is doing this, or if it's doing it. So what I'm going to do when I begin to debug Tim's crashing 30 PDF app is I'm going to put a bunch of debug statements in a bunch of deallocate methods, so I can see when is iOS triggering this, or is it not triggering it, or what's happening? Why are we not releasing the memory for something? That's a great question, and I hope I explain that, Smug. It's super refers to the parent class of the class you're in. There's that super example all over the place, right? So let's look at like view did load, or view will appear. Let me find another one here. Here we go. init with nibname. iOS is going to call that class when this thing's initialized. So again, super init with nibname, right? It's calling that. So we're saying, hey, parent class, this is happening, trigger that. So there's a bunch of technical words like overloading, overriding. You can read about in programming theory, and different languages use different terminology for that stuff. But the idea is, hey, parent class, do this, and so it'll bubble up. Great question. So Jim, let's move on to your plugin question.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. What I'm working on is I'm trying to fire a method to load other screens.
Got it.
Trying to load other screens from a plugin.
Okay.
And I was just wondering what the best way to do that with, as far as, even if it's okay, one image button and I'm loading one screen, should I still set it up as an array with child items, or just fire one separate method? Does that make sense?
I think I understand what you're saying, but I guess I'm not sure. Most of us in this discussion are all familiar with this, method we use, called handleTapToLoadScreen. And so, assuming you're triggering that to load the next screen, which you would be, I guess I don't understand where the child. What are the child items for? The next screen or the screen you're on?
Well, I didn't know, I saw it, how we reference child items in all the menu ones,
Right?
and I didn't know if the best way to set up the menu tab would be through only having one child item. I guess because I was looking at that method, the handle button tap,
Uh-huh.
and maybe just kind of talking it out here, maybe it just kind of makes a little more sense to me now. But
Yeah, let's talk it out a little bit more. I'm going to copy this method, and I'm going to put it just somewhere in a bunch of white space so we can just think about this and analyze this for a second. So anywhere you want to call this method handleTapToLoadScreen, it's a, quote, class method of the Buzztouch View Control Manager class. You're going to need to pass it 3 things every single time. And I just know that from memory. But the first thing's called, this is the name of the method, and the first thing that it wants is some screen data. The next thing it wants is some menu item data. And the third thing that it wants is some more screen data. And let me explain that a little bit. So what is screen data? Screen data is always a Buzztouch item. So if we allocated a Buzztouch item, this item, we'll just do it like this. BT item, allocate some memory for it, initialize it. Right? So there's a Buzztouch item, and you might want to give this thing an item. This item set item ID 1. Naturally, this item's going to have other properties like its JSON data and stuff like that. But let's call this item 1, and let's call another one item 2. And let's call another one item 3. And I'll show you what I mean. So what are these things? These things represent the JSON data for objects, right? So the JSON data for this one, I'm just going to type it in shorthand, so I don't have to worry about the syntax and all that, just so we can see it. This one here might be item ID. We gave this 1. So this is what the JSON might look like for this first item. Maybe the item type is a Buzz carousel, the screen we're on. And maybe the item nickname is my spinner, whatever. So that's what the JSON looks like there. So the JSON for the next item, it's not a Buzz carousel. It's like a menu item or something. We give it anything we want, menu item. So your menu item has its own JSON. We'll call this my button or something. And so it might have properties like load screen, nickname, an ID. It might have, it's a button, right? You've made this thing on your own. It might have a weird property like Mickey Mouse's middle name. I don't know, something arbitrary. Joe. It's just an object. They're all the same types of objects, Buzztouch items, but because we can give it any kind of JSON data we want, we can set the rules right in this JSON. And then the third thing is, let's say, another screen. But this is a BT screen menuSimple, my menu. So because this is a menuSimple, we know that particular kind of plugin needs child items, right? So let's give this thing some child items. Never mind the color of the syntax here. I'm in a text editor. So child items is an array, and it has additional things, right? Representing rows or buttons or something like that. So it might have, the child items might have 1 button, 2 buttons, 3 buttons. I don't know, just arbitrary here, just talking out loud. The key here is, we'll put some commas after these. The key here is we have 3 things. The first one, the second one, and the third one. The first one represents the screen we are on now. The second one represents the button we just tapped, or row, or anything really. It's just an item, something we just tapped. And then the third one represents the next screen we want to load. So we created these 3 items because this view control manager needs 3 items to load the next screen. So the first thing that it asks for, and if you looked at its interface, it would describe this for you, is the screen that we're on. So we call this item 1. So it needs the data for the screen we're on. So you'll generally see that called self.screenData. The next thing it needs is the menu thing that we tapped. So that's item 2. And the next thing it needs is the data for the screen we are about to load. So that's how you could fire that method, just purely manually, by hand, dynamically, right? You don't need anything beyond that. But you probably are going to get your items from the JSON data, right? So you're going to get them from an array, or you're going to get them from, you know, maybe the screen that we're going to load is not hand built. Maybe it exists in the configuration data. So it's BT item 3. We're going to say it equals, hey delegate, ask your root app to get the data for this item by this ID. Right, so we don't have to build it manually. We can just grab it out of the config of the app. But it's still a Buzztouch item, and it's still called item 3. Or maybe you don't want to, you know, and your button might have something like transition type, you know, flip or whatever. Maybe you don't have anything important on your button, so you don't even have a second item. So instead of passing a second item, we just pass nil. It still needs something here, but it can be empty or blank. You won't be able to pass nil as the next screen because it needs to load another screen. So I feel like you understood most of that 10-minute discussion already, and I think you're asking a different question, but I wanted to make sure those who were listening got an opportunity to hear that. Where are you running the next screen? I mean, where's your button?
Well, no, that explains it very perfectly. I was getting confused with the BT items.
Okay, got it. So this, in fact, let's talk about that for a second, because people ask all of the time, why do we have this BT item concept? Because in all the other programming languages, I'm taught to do things like, you know, my car, car equals, you know, car allocate init, my boat equals boat allocate init. And by the way, I didn't release any memory on that last source code, so ignore that. But my point is in most programming, they teach you to create things that are easy to understand, and so your car might have properties. Remember, this is a class that you made in a different file called my car. But your my car, oops, my car, my boat, my syntax right. Your car might have properties like set color, blue, car set engine size, V8. And your boat might have properties like boat set length 20 feet, and it might have boat set, I don't know, what else do you have about a boat? Mast height, I'm just coming up with stuff, 30 feet. So the point is the car and the boat are easy to understand. It takes advantage of what object-oriented programming allows us to do as developers, keep track of things, cars and boats in this example. You can make my boat 1. You can make my boat 2. Right? It's easy to understand because the words and the syntax help us figure out what the heck this is. They're both boats, but they got different names, and they have different names, and they have different properties. So why the Buzztouch items? Well, the Buzztouch item concept is, from a programmer's perspective, is easy to understand, but we get confused about it all the time as we get started down this programming path, because it's hard to keep track of, you know, 3 different items because they don't have. We'll go back to where we were. Item 1. It's a Buzztouch item, but we give it a name, item 1. We give it a name, item 2, and we'll give it a name, item 3. You can see how it becomes challenging for the developer to understand the difference, I'm going to get rid of these boats and cars, between this thing, and this thing. They all look the same. There'd be no easy way to know that this is a boat, this is a car, and this is a boat, and this is another boat. Well, that's what item type is for. Item 1, set item type, boat or car. But item 2 is not a boat, or it's not a car, it's a boat. We're programmers, we get to decide this. It's a boat. And so is item 3. So that item type is used to just help us and the software understand what kind of thing this particular Buzztouch item is. By the way, these are all Buzztouch items. Because we use these things everywhere. This can be a screen, this can be a button, this can be anything we want. And the reason it can be anything we want is we can represent it using our JSON data. So because we use JSON data, item type will always match this item type. Color, engine, right? You get the idea. A car will have different properties than a boat. So we don't have individual properties called length and mast height in this Buzztouch item class. There's no way that the Buzztouch item class could know in advance what kind of properties you as a developer might want to use. So we just have one long list of them in JSON format so you can control whatever you want them to be. So this is a boat, and then the code can read this stuff, and it allows for an enormously large amount of flexibility. So we had on our boat, we had mast height, and we had length, I think. And you, the developer, get to choose, what these things are. So I hope that explains what Buzztouch items are. And of course, because everything's a Buzztouch item, it makes lots of things easier. For example, storing them in the database, reading the configuration file. When you read the configuration file in an app, you realize that everything's a Buzztouch item, a theme, a button, a screen, a child item. It just helps make it that much more flexible when we're programming, but also a little bit confusing. I'll admit that boat classes and car classes are easier to understand, but once you do understand this, you'll be, I think, blown away at how flexible you can get with it. And by the way, because we're not using ARC, we would have to release these after we did something with them. Hopefully that is a little lesson worth learning. I don't see any other questions there, but I'm thinking Jim's on the right track now with, I totally understand how confusing it can be. What the heck is a Buzztouch item? You know what I mean? It can get confusing. I tend to give them little nicknames. Like when I'm doing these by hand, I'll tell myself reminder. This is a note about this item. And I just ignore that particular piece of JSON in the data. These little reminders that I leave myself. They're not hurting anything as long as they're syntactically okay. It's not going to hurt anything. So what's up, Ian?
Hey, Did. It's just interesting that you're talking about this ARC stuff. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
No, it's just interesting that we're talking about this ARC stuff because this is that PDF plugin that I'm working on. The files revolve around the ARC stuff. But
the fact that it's built for an ARC project or not for an ARC project.
Well, it's easy for me to add the files to a BT project, and it's just a couple little stuff in Xcode to make my project files work. They're ARC related in a BT project. Yeah. But I was thinking, I'll put my little plugin question in queue for next time because it could open up a can of worms. But yeah, cool stuff. Mine's related to my plugin, still showing a background menu. It's hard to explain. I'd have to share my screen at some point to get my point across. But we'll save that for another time. But it might be a cool, since we're on this little tangent, for next time when everybody tunes into another Q&A. Yeah, it's going to be some cool stuff that they'll see and I'll get to see. The funny thing, and I'm gonna throw you under the bus here a little bit.
Ian does a ton of work with all different kinds of projects and stuff, and he's so sensitive to all of our time, you know, mine and everyone else, and people in the community and all that kind of stuff, and that he almost always ends his question with, "Let's take that in another time because I know we're busy." And I can tell you guys that he says that to the point where we never get to his stuff, and I think it's cool, but one of these days we got to actually just open up all your stuff on screen and do like a 3-hour like marathon deal over it all. It'd be awesome. As much as we all appreciate that, I always smile when you say that. In fact, Tim's asking, which is related to this, as long as we're still talking about memory, what happens if you release something then reference it again? That's a great question, and it's a guaranteed crash 100% of the time. So if you created an item, released it, and then referenced it again, it would crash. So that's where this concept of asking the operating system to auto-release comes into play. You might see auto-release somewhere. Create a BuzzTouch item. Oh, I missed a bracket here. Allocate some memory for it. Initialize it. And then, hey iOS, do the best you can to release this when you, quote-unquote, think you're done with it. Sometimes that works pretty well, sometimes it doesn't. But auto-release is also gone with the introduction of Arc. But that's a great concept, Tim, and it's hard to know when to release things, especially when you're just getting started. But to answer your question concretely, you can't reference something that you released because that location in memory is no longer what you think it is. It's not there. And then he's also saying maybe that's the same problem, and it kind of is the same problem. I don't think our iPad is referencing something that's been released already, because the logic there would be your app would be crashing like on the first PDF or the second, you know, as soon as you did something. It would, that's more of a kind of a hard fail. It's kind of unavoidable. I think what we're running into is a build up in a situation where iOS is running out of memory or getting close to running out of memory. Our application loses priority and it kills it. And it might even not be able to do that because it crashes the whole device. It may just be, you know, doing something we're not. It's just running out of juice, you know. And so, who knows? I've seen the app before, and I know that there's not like 200-page PDFs or giant, heavy, memory-intensive things. They're pretty small files. So, I think it's related to the plugin code, and it's probably going to be a big smile when we find that line. But gotta get the tools out and start analyzing. Warren, can we go back to handleTapToLoadScreen? Sure.
Oh, let me go back. Let me go back first to Tim's thing. Now that I got the mic here, but
okay.
Do you think Tim's issue is due to how fast that guy is testing it, how fast he's using it, or would it just after you did it 100 times it would crash no matter how fast he was flipping through pages?
Tim, you can probably answer that, but I think I know what it is.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. When I was running the iPad last night with the instruments open and running, you know, it slowed the iPad down. I guess just from all the data going back and forth between the Mac and the pad, and that seemed like enough to. It went about 50 screens before it finally crashed, but it would still do it.
So it doesn't matter how fast you're paging through it, just how long, how many transactions you do, or how many times you do something.
I have a feeling, I don't know this for sure, I have a feeling if you did it slower, it would probably not crash. But
yeah, either way though, it's good to know, right? We need to find and fix this. And you're bringing up a good point about the simple menu. Because you're going back and forth, you're bringing up a good point in the chat window that not everyone else is seeing. Tim's saying, yeah, I am seeing a couple memory leaks in the instruments tool, and just so everyone knows, instruments is a tool that you can use in Xcode to try to isolate memory leaks. Tim's saying, hey, I'm running, you know, instruments, and I'm seeing a couple of leaks in the menu in the simple menu. It could be that it's not the PDF after all, and because we're going back and forth between the menu and the PDF, the menu itself might be reallocating over and over and over and over again a memory for an object back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, such as every time the screen loads, and never releasing that memory. And it might indeed be that the menu. That's a great point, and certainly we got to try to find that. But it's just going to be a matter of testing, and finding where I erred when I made that source code file. And it might be such a minor thing that it's only producible in this situation where we're, what are we going to call this? Extreme tapping, I guess. Good stuff.
It actually was, when I ran the analyzer is where it showed the leaks, not in the leaks instrument. Sorry.
No, I understand. I was just talking shorthand, but okay, analyzer, leaks, instruments is kind of a global term for that whole suite of tools to analyze your app. Which is, by the way, I'm a huge Xcode fan, only because we can compare it to all the other development environments that we've all used, and it seems to do really, really well. But for the life of me, I just can't get really, really happy with the instruments suite of tools. I think it's because I feel like it should be simpler to do what they're promising to do, and it's a balancing act that Apple's playing to try to manage that super fine granule level of detail that some developers might want to know, versus just making it brain dead easy to say, how many objects have I allocated and have you released them? You know, that kind of stuff. And so I understand that the challenge there, and I mean, we're up against the same problem. And Jim's saying he's got an app that crashes when you load PDFs too quickly as well. So maybe it is the PDF app. I'll definitely get on this. That's good to know, Jim. And it also, here's the crazy thing, there might not be anything wrong with our code, right? There might be something about the web view that we use to load the PDFs and the PDFs themselves that, you know, just can't handle it. Keep in mind that PDF is not an iOS native technology, right? That's an agreement between Apple and Adobe to include that in iOS, and maybe we're not alone. I think it's probably our code. I'm certainly not trying to lay the blame somewhere else, but some of these things.
Want to hear something really strange?
Yeah.
All right. So an organizer, after the thing crashes, you pull up the device in the console, and every time I've got it to crash, there is one error line that does show up, and it's always exactly the same. It says max open files 78.
Well, dude, this is huge. This is huge. So this tells me a lot. And then I'm going from memory here because I can't seem to, and Jim's saying his goes back to menu too, but I can't seem to pull tens of thousands of lines of code out of my head, but I can try. So max files open 78. I think that PDF is I think that plugin is saving the PDF, even though it's included in the project. I think it copies it and saves it to the temporary directory in the app. And maybe there's a limit to the number of temporary files we can create there before we delete them. I'm not aware of a number limit like 78 files. I know that we've got hard drive space on the device or storage space on the device we have to be aware of, but that's a great tip. That's a great tip. All of these clues are going to help.
I tried to Google the max open file 78 and nothing comes up, but it is every time it's crashed. I'm awesome. Looking at one of the console logs right now, and it's the last line.
So maybe when that screen unloads, we have to make sure that we're doing a little house cleaning that maybe we're not doing, right? Maybe we're saving it to the documents directory or the temp directory so the web view can open it. And then maybe when we navigate away from that screen, we should be deleting it, and we're not, and we're leaving it around to cache it or something like that. Great one.
This is why you don't let a customer beta test an app on a device that you don't have control of.
I feel sorry for you, but you know, you're amazing in terms of your ability to kind of morph into these different industries, and you jumped into this one with, you know, tons of enthusiasm, and you're learning some of the things that absolutely. It's hard to work professionally with customers, and for the most part they're really easy on you, but every now and then you get kind of a trap. You know, you get a guy who's not real patient, or maybe he's paid you a little too much and he doesn't quite understand, and it's just kind of the perfect storm. I hear you. We'll get you through this.
I would have been.
Yeah, exactly. I'm the same way. You know, I pay somebody for something. I don't want to deal with these kinds of things, so you can't blame anybody. But yeah, it sounds like a good guy who's just kind of like, just fix it, Tim.
Yeah.
So what do we got? About a minute left, Warren?
Yeah, a minute or two.
Okay, I better erase all my code here in Kitsy's carousel so I don't break it. I don't have any more questions in the list. I think that was a fun little 45-minute kind of brain surgery, allocation, memory discussion, ARC discussion, you know, how to load another screen discussion. I did fall into the guilty trap of jumping right to iOS again. We could have, maybe next week somebody will nudge me into saying, hey, let's do Android. Let's do Android. I'm always in, that's like my default mode, and I need to get away from that because some of us are more Android fans than iOS fans, but we'll try to switch that.
Before we go
Do you
any
have time
further,
to see that app that you made with Trish and Keith a few weeks ago?
Say that again?
Do you have time to show us that app that you made with Trish and Keith?
I would if I had the new Xcode installed on this laptop, but I don't.
Oh, okay.
I can't compile it and show it to you, but yeah, it's pretty cool. At the coding contest, that was fun.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Warren?
well, first of all, did you win the $10,000?
We did not win the $10,000. We in our minds, and this is not being selfish, we actually did in terms of what was presented on stage. You know, you had 8 hours to make an app start to scratch. We made something amazing and cool, and we felt pretty confident about our offering to the judges. But we also knew, kind of going into this, that we weren't going to win this thing. There was, you know, there's a certain amount of, let's just say, benefit to giving the award to maybe a local guy or a young guy, or it was pretty clear that ours was the most impressive. But no, we didn't win.
I see.
We weren't too. It was a little disappointing, but at the same time, we're not that naive. I mean, we went in there and pretty much owned. So I think I'm not so sure that's what they were looking for.
Okay, one other quick question, and it's kind of cryptic from Tim Wolf. It says 2.1.9.
Yeah, 2.1.9 is referring to self-hosted again. We're already starting to mumble a little bit about another version of that. It's only been 2 months, and we're actually about 6 weeks, and I'm already talking about pushing that out. No dates. There's been about 11 files, 8 or 9 files that have changed since 2.1.8 came out, and I've been kind of slowly pushing them out to support different servers and whatnot. And in fact, Tim's is on my list to look at. There's a bunch of weird you know, server behavior that we go through every time, which is why we try to stretch out the self-hosted releases, because we know that with each one that we push out, we do a couple of weeks worth of work or a month's worth of work to get everybody's host to support it, and we want to kind of take advantage of that as long as we can, because we know as soon as 2.1.9 comes out, well, then you're gonna have a whole new list of things. So no dates, but I do think it makes sense that maybe we need to make a page somewhere that says these are the files that have already changed. If you want to upload them, you can. Something like that. Good question.
Okay. So next, let's see, tomorrow, I believe, Ian's got another new user webinar. And then next Tuesday at this time.
No, that's the following.
Oh, it is?
That's the following week, Warren.
Okay.
The 27th.
So we don't have anything tomorrow. Then next Tuesday would be another of the Android training sessions that Susan is facilitating with David. And then
Awesome.
new user webinar next Wednesday. And then the following Tuesday, we'll do another one of these Q&As. So with that, unless anybody else has anything, it's time to sign off, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, Warren. We'll talk to you later.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks.
guys.